I like the let us know. Hi everyone who's joining us, please do feel free to pop a hello in the chat, an emoji in the chat, what kind of setting you're from or school, age group, year group, just pop on and say hi. Hi, lovely. Oh, Independent Girls School, Lancashire. Are you Sophie? Whereabouts in the country are you from? St. Paulo in Brazil. Wow. That's exciting. From little old Worcester. International School, Southampton. London. Oh, we're all over. Fantastic. Stoke-on-Trent. Hi, primary schooler. Lovely. More from London. Do say what age phase you work with as well, whether you're primary, secondary, a bit of both, special schools. Small school in West Oxfordshire. Lovely. Mauritius International Primary. I'm not a bit jealous.
Such a lovely range.
Yeah, primary nursery. Oh, fantastic. Portugal. Oh, Karina, SCMH. Oh, that's where my heart lies. Special school. Ooh. Primary and secondary, brilliant. Primary in Cambridgeshire. Lovely. Anyone who's joined us, do pop on, say hi, where you're from, what year group or age group do you work with? Kindergarten in Spain. I used to teach abroad and I do miss the international school life, but it was pre-kids. Yes, so am I, Chantal. Not that Bristol isn't fabulous. Let's just put that out there now. And yeah, Greater Manchester. Oh, lovely. Whole school approach, brilliant. Parent with a kid, lovely. Well, welcome. Primary Wigan. Fab. Oh, well, welcome everybody. It's really, really lovely kind of to just have a chance, an hour to kind of get together, talk about all things well-being. And myself and Becky are going to kind of do a little bit thinking about what well-being actually looks like in school, in terms of how we champion it. You know, what is well-being? We're going to start with that and think about that, and then start to think about the ways in which we can really support this in school, but also as parents, you know, how we can support that in terms of our littlies and not so littlies when we're parents, but in our brain they'll always be babies, won't they? That's the difficult bit. So we're just going to have a really lovely chat about thinking about what well-being really means. And all of the links, you'll get this whole PowerPoint, the links, everything will be available to you and sent to you after. And there'll also be links and things put in the kind of chat box as well as we go through. We've got the fabulous Cassie and Sarah who are helping us with all the techie bits. So we'll just concentrate on the actual well-being part. Mm-hmm. Lovely. Okay, so I'm just going to check that works. Brilliant. So when we think about well-being, I just kind of wanted to have a more international approach to it. So I went to UNICEF in terms of what well-being actually is. And this is a dated report, but I think it really sort of resonated with me in terms of well-being. Very often when we think about well-being, we only think about mental health. And it's so much more than that. You know, it's thinking about our safety, our health, material security, thinking about our sense of belonging, and thinking about that kind of family or people who care for us as well. So it's not just about mental health, although obviously so many things can have an impact on our mental health, but it's a much bigger kind of concept than solely mental health. And as we go through today, I just wanted to just kind of think about what that means in the curriculum and what that means as families, you know, however your family is made up, or however the families of the children in your class are made up. So I am a firm believer that you need to have Maslow before you have Bloom. Before we think about any of those, I'm sure, please do pop in the chat if your school has introduced, the Bloom's taxonomy of questioning and all that kind of thing, and you've been subjected to 18 different staff meetings about how to get really great questioning. Questioning's brilliant. But if we don't have Maslow's hierarchy of needs and those basic needs, we can't actually get to all of the learning. Because we know that if children are hungry, if they don't feel safe, if they're upset, if they're tired, all of those things, that really impacts on their learning. And I think the more, obviously lockdown has had a huge impact on our children and young people and our teachers as well, and us as educators. But we also need to think about things perhaps a little bit more from a trauma-informed approach. So when we think about those children who have adverse childhood experiences, the rates of adverse childhood experience have increased phenomenally. And we think about how we can support those pupils in our classes in terms of a supportive curriculum, but also a really supportive environment of what that looks like, so that when they come into a class or when they want to speak to you, that they feel safe in doing that. And that can take on lots and lots of different elements. So it could be just the physical elements of your classroom. Can they actually get around easily enough? If they have a mobility restriction, or if they are easily distracted and you set them, looking out the window, actually is their environment, set up so that they feel secure and they feel safe. So that physical environment can be sort of, just the layout of your classroom can be really important. Then we think about kind of the range of things that they see within the classroom. Are they able to get things themselves? Can they feel independent? Do they feel as though they are empowered within the classroom to be able to make choices about their own learning? I think we underestimate the power of having a choice. We all like choices. Sometimes too many choices can be very overwhelming. So we have to kind of limit that in terms of the choices we give. But having a choice of what they want to use to support their learning can give that safety net that our pupils sometimes need if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed with things. They know that they've got that support, and they know that they don't have to always ask for help, but they can go to that. That can be a really empowering thing in the classroom. Thinking about how we have a sense of space to discuss things. I think we're sometimes so worried as educators about, discussing anything that might be controversial or might be a bit tricky. And it's so important that we have conversations that are difficult, because, for some pupils, you might be the only person they can talk to about that, or that might be the only place where they can have a safe conversation where there's respect, where they can find out the truth without any bias, where they can find out an educated kind of, aspect where you're giving lots of different perspectives of a particular topic. And they might not have that anywhere else in their lives. So, there'll be times where maybe they don't perhaps use the most up-to-date correct language, or they use language which might offend people. It's important that we don't tell them off instantly about that, but actually we say, okay, so that's something you might have heard, but actually, this is the language that we use to make sure that everybody feels safe and respected, so that it's a place where they can make mistakes. And we must allow our pupils to make mistakes, and we must model mistakes. I see so many teachers and student teachers who, if they make a spelling mistake, they're like, oh my goodness, I made a mistake, and they sort of get a little bit worried about it. But actually we should say, oh, do you know what? I made a mistake. Right. Can anyone help me here? Because, it's okay, but now I need to look at how I can, put this right, or how do I spell this, or, if I've made a mistake in a calculation or whatever it might be. Have that really open and safe space where it's okay to make mistakes, because if we don't make them, then we can't learn. And we don't grow as people. We just keep making the same mistakes and feel bad about it. So when we think about Maslow and that hierarchy of needs, it's so much more than Breakfast Club. Although breakfast clubs are amazing, it's so much more than making sure that they've got a marker that says, yes, I'm happy, I'm sad, or whatever, but that we're really developing that into so much more, so that they have that space. So once they feel safe, once they feel secure, we all know what it's like if you're hungry and you can't concentrate because you're so hungry or you're so cold. I'm sure lots of you are experiencing ventilated rooms at the moment. I know that we are at university, It's not always the warmest because we've got our coats on and the windows are open because of COVID, and that can be a little tricky. So it's acknowledging things like that to make sure that they know that they're not alone when we're thinking about well-being. When we think about where this fits in terms of the curriculum then, right from EYFS, well-being needs to be a huge consideration and a priority. I mean, I'm biased because I'm a PSHE lecturer, but it needs to be a priority in terms of, because of what I said about Maslow before Bloom's, but also in terms of pupils being able to have that empowerment to know that they have choices in their life, that they can take risks, kind of factor in the risk factors of things, that they can articulate how they feel, that they can resolve conflicts with friends, and that it's normal for friendships to have ups and downs, and that's perfectly normal and that's okay. So right from the development matters right through to key stage 5, we still do well-being at degree level and postgraduate level. It doesn't ever stop, but that fits in terms of our statutory RSE. And I would obviously argue that if you're going to teach RSE, which we need to do as a statutory requirement, you must do that within a wider element of PSHE. So thinking about financial education. If our children are worried about money or they don't have an understanding about money, then that can be a real setback for them in terms of making choices later on. Citizenship. When we think about the positives that come out of sharing our lives with other people and doing things within our communities or for other people, that's not in the RSE programme, but it's a wider part of PSHE that we need to make sure is included. And then things like sustainability, sustainability being in the outdoors, thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals. So although we've got development matters and we've got our PSED and we've got relationship, the RSE, education right up to secondary, we need more. We need more than that. And I'm sure, all of you working with young children and young people will agree that, unless we get well-being firmly as a whole school approach, the pockets of things that we're doing in our classroom will absolutely make a difference, but we need that bigger approach to really be able to make a difference to our pupils. So what does it actually look like? For me, certainly the schools that I work with, and having worked in schools and kind of developing curriculum and things, it's about having a well-planned PSHE curriculum. So having that planned curriculum that has a set time, and this is particularly important in secondary where this often gets overlooked, or it's a half a day drop down where they're trying to cram all of RSE in because of time constraints, which I completely understand, by the way. But we need our leaders in schools to really understand the importance of this and to think about how can you get an hour a week or 2 hours every fortnight, whatever, for really high quality PSHE curriculum. Thinking about whole school ethos, which promotes curiosity. So asking questions, making time for discussion, feeling like you can talk to your peers, but also you can ask your teachers questions, having committees where you can go to, or signposting throughout the school so that if you don't know something, you can look elsewhere if you want to know more. That safe space for pupils. Now, some pupils will need a separate space. For some pupils, they will find a classroom overwhelming and that isn't their safe space. And so having maybe a nurture group, having that kind of targeted intervention for those pupils to work on particular skills in terms of well-being. It might be working on elements of emotional literacy, it might be communication, it might be peer mediation, it could be whatever it is that pupil or that young person needs. But their safe space might look slightly differently. And it's working that out through relationships, which is obviously the key for everything that we do, is knowing our pupils, knowing our young people, working with them, talking to them, finding out what they want, and actually using that pupil voice or that young person's voice to really feed into what we do. Pupil and student voice doesn't have to be this kind of onerous task or anything. It can be something as simple as, write something you'd love to see in our school, on a Post-it note and pop it in a box. It could be a Microsoft Teams form. It could be a Mentimeter, where you're just getting them to do it anonymously so that they don't feel, there's that distancing kind of between it. There can be lots of creative ways that you can do that. And then using that voice and saying to them, this is what you said, so this is what we did. that, you know, that working together is a very, very powerful tool in terms of what wellbeing looks like in a school. Creating lots and lots of opportunities for peer work, for independent tasks, whole group discussions, working outside different environments, going to different kind of environments such as perhaps museums, library. You know, not all children thrive in a sort of traditional classroom setting, as I'm sure lots of you know. So having that variety can be really important for wellbeing in terms of them seeing education in a broader sense and then seeing the purpose of some of the things that we're doing. Creating opportunities for pupils self-reflect. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about emotional literacy, but pupil reflection, self-reflection is a huge part of our kind of journey in wellbeing in terms of, you know, what is it that I do that makes me feel good? What is it that I do that I don't really like and leads to me feeling as though I feel overwhelmed or I'm out of control? Or, you know, what are the things that I need to do? Representation and that sense of belonging. We need representation everywhere. Every child, teacher, governor, young person needs to feel as though they are represented in your setting. So that's displays. What kind of language are you using? Are you always saying mum and dad, or are you saying people who love you at home or people at home? Do you only have pictures of a nuclear family or a house, you know, that looks like a typical house? Have you got other pictures of sort of flats or narrow boats or whatever, you know, caravans? People live in lots of different places. So having that representation is really important. And a really easy way to do that is to get a group of your young people from different year groups and to go through your school and say, okay, what do our displays look like? Are they inclusive? What's the language like? What are the posters like? What are the books in the library like? You know, is there a representation in the books that we have here? And if not, there's a lovely project for a group or, you know, your school to get involved in. Having nutritious meal options, water available. You know, we shouldn't underestimate the fact that well-being comes from within as well in terms of, you know, the foods we eat. Disappointing that we can't eat cake all the time or drink wine, you know, but you know, apparently nutritious meals the way to go. So definitely having those options at school and being able to have that available. You know, if you do have a breakfast club or you have a snack or a tuck shop and things, having choices for pupils to make of choice, maybe foods that they might not always access. Clear safeguarding procedures. I'm sure you're all fed up of safeguarding at the moment, extra training and everything that's going on, but having clear safeguarding procedures that link to wellbeing and a consideration of wellbeing within your safeguarding procedures and your policies is important. And then finally, teaching of consent. We must teach about consent. And when we think about consent, sometimes we only think about sexual consent sort of in secondary schools, but actually that's in early years when you're talking about children. You know, if a child does want to hold another child's hand, that's teaching about consent. If you have a child who plays with one child's hair on the carpet and they don't like it, you know, being able to turn around and say, no, thank you, I don't like that, or please don't do that, I don't like it, is consent. So we do all of these things in terms of consent that go right from early years right up through. I still teach about consent to postgraduates, to my undergraduates, because it's a really important reminder for people. How might you teach the objectives? So again, thinking about wellbeing in terms of, I just picked some of the objectives here to very briefly go over because I am aware that there's just not enough time in these webinars. So thinking about the effects and importance of physical exercise, time outdoors, community participation, all of these things about that link to our well-being. And that's where that self-reflection really comes in. Well-being and sort of self-care look very different for lots of people. You know, lots of people might like, I know people who like to run for well-being and for their self-care. For me, I like to run if I was being chased by a bear or in some kind of danger. It's not for me. I'm a book girl, or, you know, going for a walk or something like that, or weight training, but it will look differently for everybody. So sometimes we have in schools where everybody has to do mindfulness or everybody has to do this. You know, Becky's got lots of amazing strategies that she's going to talk about, but one of the things that she does have a variety. And that, I think that's important, that people can recognise what their own self-care might look like, and our pupils to find out what it is that makes them feel really happy, or makes them feel calm, or makes them feel excited about something, or makes them feel connected. So that kind of idea of community participation and voluntary service might not be something you've considered within your setting, but it's actually a really important element. And there are ways that you can do that even in COVID. So if anyone is kind of, you know, struggling for ideas or anything, please do get in touch with them. I'm more than happy to kind of have a talk over any of this or help with things. The importance of self-respect, that consent comes with that, healthy self-image, lots of things around kind of body image, the way that we talk about ourselves, the way that you as a teacher talk about yourself. Are you very negative about yourself, and are you modelling that? These little things we do have to pick up on, because we are role models for our children and young people. And then healthy friendships are positive and they don't exclude people. So we have a lot in terms of, next week with Children's Mental Health Week, a lot of the reports that sometimes we get in terms of wellbeing are about feeling excluded or about bullying. So it might be a time to kind of really reflect on what is it that you do in terms of promoting inclusion, promoting inclusive play, promoting, kind of not being friends with everybody, but that kind of, being civil to everybody, being kind to everyone. And then how is bullying dealt with in your school? Because if people tell me that there's no bullying in their school, it makes me wonder what's going on, because there will always be bullying. There will always be some kind of exclusion. And it's important that we have that bystander training as well, so that our pupils are aware of how to negate that as much as possible. Okay, so emotional literacy. Emotional literacy is essentially having some self-awareness of a recognition of your own feelings, and then being able to manage those feelings. And sometimes, particularly in early years and primary, sometimes we stick to, are you happy? Are you sad? Or we do circle time. They go around, they say, I am sad today. I am happy today. But actually, there's so much more in terms of emotional literacy. We want to give pupils the vocabulary, the knowledge, the understanding to be able to really articulate how they feel. If we teach them, about empathy, we also have to teach them about compassion, because if you are, if you have empathy and you understand how someone feels, but you don't actually act on it, or you don't give it any consideration, then actually it's not really a great thing. So having that kind of understanding of what emotions are, when you might feel that, how your body reacts when you have those emotions, how you can manage certain emotions, is a really important aspect of our well-being and well-being in schools. And this goes right through to secondary, it goes right through to FE, in terms of if pupils are, or young people are struggling, then having that language to be able to say why or how, or to see a way to manage that, or to get support for that. So emotional literacy, there are so many different, I'm a massive lover, hopefully you can see that, of picture books. There's Fergal is Fuming. There are lots of secondary books that you can use. Sort of Wonder by R.J. Palacio is a really good one. Tons and tons. I will create a book list, or please do feel free to pop any books that you use in the chat. So I'm looking this way because my chat screen is over there. If you've got any brilliant books that support emotional literacy, please do pop them in the chat and let's share them, because that's a really great way to kind of promote some books which might be useful in the class. Games are a really great way to support emotional literacy, and I don't always think that circle time is the best way for us to promote emotional literacy, because sometimes people won't want to talk in that kind of, very like 29 other people watching them as they say how they feel. So there are lots of ways in which we can support that. But this kind of emotional literacy, and having those other words which mean, sometimes we aren't sad, sometimes we aren't angry, sometimes embarrassed, or we're frustrated. So really important to be able to support that. I'm aware we're so short on time today, but I'm going to pass over to Becky, who's got some amazing kind of add-ons to this and things that we can do to really support that as well. So Becky, over to you.
Thank you, Victoria. That was so interesting. I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective, in that I'm a children's therapist and I write activity books on wellbeing for young people. But of course, the same principles apply across both Victoria and my views. It all starts with you. You are that role model to the young people that you are raising, or the young people that you're working with, and your wellness and well-being is absolutely vital, because as the old saying goes, you just can't pour from an empty cup. And unless you've been fed, and unless you're feeling warm and comfortable, You're not going to be with that young person in a positive and empowering way. You're going to be a bit irritable or a bit agitated. So always check in with yourself first and try and get your own needs met. And that will mean finding out what makes you happy, what makes you calm, and what makes you relaxed, and finding time for them. And I know as teachers, that's not always easy, but I would say it's absolutely vital, because just like we say that unless children feel well, they're not going to be great learners. Unless you feel good, it's hard to parent or to teach. So as adults, we need to access and accept the help and support we need, just like we'll encourage the young people we care for to access and accept the help they need. And if we role model that, if we role model looking after ourselves and talk about it freely with young people, they will see that that's a normal and natural part of self-care and self-kindness, and how very important that is to then being able to function well. Because children who don't feel good, and teachers that don't feel good, and parents that don't feel good aren't going to achieve as much. It's absolutely tied up with achievement. So I know schools have these remits where they've got to get certain grades and certain levels met, but well-being always comes first, because a child that doesn't feel well or a teacher that isn't feeling great are not going to achieve their potential. They say in terms of intelligence, we are 30% more intelligent when we're calm. That's a huge, huge amount more. Right? So before a child ever goes into a test or an exam, rather than cramming more revision, a quick little meditation session could well improve their grades. And we need to really embrace that understanding of well-being. It makes a huge difference, not only to emotional health and well-being, but also to achievement. And I would say for both carers and teachers, well-being and achievement are our common goals. It's what we want for the young people we're looking after. Pupil well-being affects so many things. A child who feels confident, calm, relaxed, and in control will be able to manage their stress well. That means their attendance at school will be better, and better attendance will lead to better progress. A child who feels well, confident, and supported is going to be more confident, so they will try new things, they'll push themselves that bit further. And they will also take risks. And it's in taking risks that we learn. As I've said, children who feel good are going to have clearer thinking. They're going to be able to focus better. So it's so worth putting in this energy into well-being, not waiting for something to go wrong with children's emotional or mental health, but making sure those well-being strategies are clearly in place. So they can focus, they can think clearly, and that will help them with problem solving so things don't reach a crisis point. Sometimes the problem with children's mental health weeks, and this focus on mental health, just like Victoria was saying, is that we think about it when something goes wrong, or when a child's presenting with anxiety or not attending school. But actually, if we put all the work in the first place, we're less likely to get to that point, because the child will be more robust and resilient, a better problem solver, attending more, more connected, and crucially, a child who has had a lot of input around well-being will know how and when to ask for help long before things go wrong. And they will cope with setbacks better too. And that's what we all want, is for our pupils and our children to be robust and resilient. So all this input into well-being is preventing problems in the future and helping young people cope with challenges as they come along. The books I write are for younger children, for primary school age children, and the idea of really going heavy on emotional well-being when they're young is so when the challenges of those teen years come, and of course they do come with hormones and peer pressure and exam stress, if we teach them when they're young to be resilient, to ask for help, to be clear thinking problem solvers, they're going to cope much, much better with those teen years. So that's why well-being matters so very, very much. There are lots of things you can do in the classroom and at home to help kids feel calm, confident, and powerful. And you might think, oh, I don't have time for all that. I have all these lessons to prepare and all this stuff to do at home and activities. But what I propose is these activities just take tiny, tiny amounts of time, but the benefits are far reaching. So if you do 5 minutes at the start of your school day, and your kids do some yoga poses, Tai Chi, breathing, coloring mandalas, whatever, these take just 5 minutes. But that child will feel more grounded, more present in the classroom. They won't be stressing about what happened at home before they set off or the spelling test that's to come. They'll be absolutely in the moment, breathing and feeling calm. And those 5 minutes will help that child then focus, participate, and feel strong and confident about the day. And there's so much variety. You can do Tai Chi, some yoga, and you, of course, as the parent or teacher must join in and show the kids that you know this is great for well-being too. Do a few minutes on breathing, have them colour some mandalas, could even do a guided visualization to help them relax before an exam. These things are scientifically proven to work. They might sound a little bit out there, a little bit strange, but give them a go, and I think you'll see a huge difference in your pupils' feelings of confidence and calm. Grounding exercise, inspiring stories. Tell them about people who've had challenges and overcome them. Just a little short story will help them think, yeah, I can do that. Things might be tough for me, but there are ways through. Use music to change mood in your classroom. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. All these things can really help a child feel emotionally grounded and present, and their work in school and their participation at home will improve as a result, because you're attending to their needs, their emotional needs, which always come before any other needs. And when they're met, amazing things can happen. Activities could include in the classroom, encouraging children to write up about when they've been kind. When they do that, they feel really good about themselves. Their self-esteem rises and they give more focus to kindness. And kindness leads to feelings of connectivity and to raised well-being. So it's crucially important that we have focus on kindness, and everybody wants a kind classroom or a kind home because they are happier places to be for all of us. You could encourage kids to write about what being a good friend means and reflect on whether they behave that way. Again, the cohesiveness in the classroom will be stronger. Your home will be a happier environment. You could make a Be Kind poster. Devise a list of random acts of kindness. And actually later on this month, it's Random Act of Kindness Day, and a lovely thing to embrace in your school. But how fabulous if we could have a whole community that in your school or in your home really values kindness to each other. That makes it a much safer environment. And like Victoria was saying before, when children feel safe, they can ask curious questions. They can ask for help. They thrive, they bloom. Reading is a brilliant way to encourage kids to look at other people's perspectives and to develop their empathy. And then, of course, we must talk, as Victoria said, about putting that empathy into action and looking out for each other and accepting difference. And nurturing activities in schools such as growing seeds, reading to younger children, raise children's self-esteem. These can be encouraged at home, of course, as well. Children helping their siblings or growing fruit and vegetables, doing some baking. There's pride involved in that work, but it's also relaxing and it makes you feel good. And then, of course, we must link healthy bodies to healthy minds. The two can't be separated, and those activities should be woven through school and home life. In terms of homework, I think this is a great place for teachers to get really creative, and it's a lovely way to bring wellbeing exercises done at school back into the home. So you could encourage young people to go home and do a nature-based activity. That means they get outdoors and away from those screens and get some fresh air. You could encourage them to do some physical exercise as part of their homework that maybe they want to do as a family and go for a walk or take some photographs. You could encourage them to do some mood tracking using a journal, perhaps, just to think about their feelings and use all those beautiful words, all that emotional literacy, and put it into action. You could even encourage young people to go home and declutter for their homework. Now, that might sound a little bit strange, but calm environments make everyone feel better. And every parent is going to thank the teacher that sends a child home to declutter for their homework. And then if you can encourage them to take the things they've decluttered to the local charity shop, they'll get that great boost, that helper's high, because they're doing something good for their community too. So there are so many ways homework can be around well-being and bringing it into the home, which just makes such a difference. A kindness bingo is a lovely idea, and one I include in one of my wellbeing books, Create Your Own Kindness. And it's just like you'd have reading bingo, book bingo, and get them to fill in different kindness activities for themselves, for other people, and to the world at large. Really want to encourage young people to be kind to themselves, because when they learn that being kind to themselves makes themselves feel so much better, they start to feel in control and no longer at the mercy of what events go on in their life, but always able to treat themselves with compassion. And when young people know how to do that, it leads to teenagers that know that self-harm is not the way to go, but self-nurturing is a brilliant solution for challenging times. So yeah, let's teach them when they're young and weave it into their homework and those resets at school. There are many things that block well-being, and we can do a lot to unpick them as parents and as educators. Many young people and adults that I know too are prone to catastrophizing. They perhaps forget one thing, maybe to revise for a spelling test, and they think it's the end of the world. There's tears, there's drama, and we need to teach them that, you know, it's absolutely not the case. And one great way to do that is encourage kids to rate their problems. Say to them, okay, you forgot your lunchbox. Have a score of 1 to 10. Is that really a 10? A 10 is the school going up in flames. Forgetting your lunchbox, it's a 1. We can sort that out. Get them to rate their problems so they don't treat every issue as a disaster, but they learn to get some perspective. Also encourage them not to generalize. Perhaps in the past they found writing difficult, or perhaps creating a story. That doesn't mean next time they will. Next time they might have a really inspired idea. So get them to approach each thing as a new thing and not to generalize, particularly not to generalize negatively. Now, perfectionism can really block learning as well as well-being. I guess you've all taught those kids who have drawn a picture, one thing's gone slightly wrong, so they rip it to shreds and say it's rubbish. This can block progress. And the way to get through perfectionism is to encourage kids to look at the process. So get them to see what went better than last time, what steps forward they've made, what have they learned, and put the value and focus on that rather than achievement. And tell them about times you've tried to do something and it's not quite worked, but what you learned well instead. I was reading the other day about the Leaning Tower of Pisa and how it was never meant to be a leaning tower. It just went a bit wrong. But in going wrong, it's made that town an absolute fortune out of tourism. You know, there's many things can be learned with failure. So do talk to kids about perfectionism and how it can really hinder people. All or nothing thinking also needs to be challenged. Just because something doesn't work out perfectly, it does not mean it's a disaster. Just because a child's having an issue with one area of school, perhaps struggling with art, doesn't mean school's a disaster. It means that needs a little bit more work. So again, teach them about perspective and do talk to them about mind reading. If they have a problem, unless they tell you, you can't know. And this happens at home and at school. So they need that emotional literacy. They need to be asking for help and telling you what's going on for them. People can't mind read, and kids don't always know that, particularly young kids. Even my teenagers, they'll come in, they might look miserable and I'll think, what's going on? And they somehow expect me to know. So I tell them quite often, I can't mind read, but I am here for you. So these things can really block well-being and learning. So yeah, these are worth addressing. One of the most important things I think we can teach children is the power of helpful thinking. There are some thoughts that really block kids, and they are very damaging to their well-being. And I call them red thoughts. I can't cope. It always goes wrong. It's too hard. It's not worth trying. It'll be a disaster and I am not good enough. Thoughts lead to feelings. Kids who have these red thoughts end up feeling overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, and unconfident. And that leads to school avoidance. It leads to kids not trying or playing around, playing the joker, or just completely withdrawing and not participating. These thoughts are very, very damaging. Now, the one thing every single child can control is their thoughts. And we need to teach them that when these red thoughts come into their mind, they need to tell them to go away. And instead, pull in these green thoughts, even if it feels quite fake, and to say to themselves loud and clear, I can cope. I can ask for help. I can calm down first before I do anything else. I can make good decisions. I can do this, and I can do hard things. Green thoughts lead to feelings of competence, of control. They lead kids to feel that, you know what, it's going to be okay. Even if it's not brilliant, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be all right. And when kids feel like that, they can think more clearly and they can make better decisions and be better problem solvers. So green thoughts are vital. And I would put these up on the wall in your classroom. I would have them on the fridge at home, and I would talk about them again and again. They can be used as affirmations. You could choose one a week and get your kids to say that as a class before the day starts. They're very, very powerful. And the basis of all cognitive behavioral therapy is thoughts affect feelings, affect behavior. So we must make sure that kids are thinking these ways. And I can try my best, of course. Hearing kids' voices, just like Victoria said, is vital. They need to feel they matter, that we value them and that we hear them. And we need to be creative about hearing them. So suggestion boxes, worry boxes. That means kids who aren't confident in speaking up in class, they can still be heard. Give them a check-in time where they can see you privately. You know, make those one-on-one connections. Ask them how they are and how they're feeling. Not just, are you okay, to which they can say yes, but open questions. And listen before you judge. If they tell you, I've not done my homework, rather than say, right, that's it, detention, which I'm sure you wouldn't do, say, why? Why? Let them tell you. Let's really let them know we care about what's going on. And if they are struggling, ask them what they think could make the situation better. What could help them treat their siblings better, or what could make them do better in that test? What do they think would help? And they might say extra lessons. They might say doing my homework at school. Kids often know what they need, and it's about respect and valuing their input. And if you trust them to come up with solutions, they'll begin to trust themselves, and hearing their voice is vital. And between school and home, we need a clear dialogue. There needs to be ease of contact. It can be very frustrating if you have a problem at home and you call school to get a receptionist who perhaps takes a message, but you don't know if it's reached the teacher. Email contact can be really valuable. There needs to be ease of contact, keeping each other updated. If there's issues at school, let home know. Issues at home, please let school know. And then we can build a circle around the child that supports their well-being, and keeping that as our focus. But also let the child be part of that circle. Let them know we've got concerns and ask for their input. Clear signposting for other services if they're needed, and get in there quickly rather than waiting for things to go wrong. There is so much we can do to support children's wellbeing. And as Victoria said, we could go on and on. And I'm sure as teachers, you have a billion brilliant ideas, and as parents you'll have loads of ideas too, so do share them with each other. And if you think, gosh, my kids' school should be doing this or that, talk to them. They will welcome your ideas. And if you're a teacher and you think this child needs a bit more of this at home, a bit more decision making, a bit more responsibility, talk to the parents, because parents want the best for their children too. We need to shine a bright light on emotional health and well-being and not wait for things to go wrong. It needs to be a key part of everything we teach, because it is the most important thing you can ever teach. And yeah, over to Victoria.
Listen, Audrey. There's so much to well-being, isn't there? There's just
Huge.
such an enormous aspect that takes so many different parts of our lives, our physical health, our emotional health, our community, all of these kind of things. And it's just a really important aspect that it's great that we have Children's Mental Health Week, and it's great, it's like LGBTQ month, History Month, whatever, but actually this should just be part and parcel of what we do every single day. And I know that we're going to take some questions, things now, but I just want to say, just go back to a point, that Becky was making about time in the classroom. I know I've been there, been a busy reception class, year 6, I've taught in secondary. I know that time is often one of the biggest limitations. And I actually decided to prioritise wellbeing in my classroom. And every Friday morning, we would do Cosmic Kids Yoga free on YouTube, and the kids got to choose which one they wanted to do. And I had a group of children who I thought would be very, very resistant to all of these things. And actually, when I missed it one week because we were doing something else, they were devastated and said, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing yoga? And I was so gobsmacked that this had kind of become part of what we were doing. But I think the most powerful thing of it is that I did it with them.
Yes.
Doing mindfulness, if you're doing it, whatever, you mentioned it, Becky, do it with them, because it's not just, then you giving them something to do, but they can see that it's a really important thing. I know that someone said about zones of regulation, and certainly we'll come on to that now, but this is just, you will get all these PowerPoints sent to you, you will get all of the links, but just a couple of things we wanted to share. So I know that the link for Becky's series, Create Your Own, there's Create Your Own Calm, Create Your Own Kindness, there's lots of them, aren't there, Becky? But there are also, she's been very kind. There's tons of free resources. I downloaded loads of them, and the illustrations on them are gorgeous. So please do click on there, download them. It's not often as a teacher you get freebies. Take all the stuff. They're really reasonably priced. They're really good to use. We've got our free wellbeing packs just here that you can download and you can use. We obviously have the My Life PSHE scheme and the Your Choice, which are full schemes of work for PSHE, which cover everything. So they cover all of the living in the wider world section as well. But again, there are freebies on that website. So, whether or not you're in need of a PSHE curriculum or not, go and get the freebies. There's policy resources, you name it. We're trying to save as much time in your busy, busy lives as teachers and parents as possible. There's a great website and podcast here, Emotionally Healthy Kids, which is a website and a podcast. I wrote with a very lovely colleague of mine a PSHE book for primary teachers, but also can be used by parents. I've just had been accepted for the secondary one, which is on its way with lots of fabulous authors. And I run the first ever, it's really exciting, we've got our first cohort of teachers who will be specialist PSHE teachers. So it's a fully online course, it's a university diploma. We cover all aspects of PSHE, and the assessment is linked to your own settings, that you can use it for your performance management targets, etc. So you can box a little clever with that too. But all of these resources will be sent to you, and all the ones we've mentioned are all on there as well. Lots of lesson plans, lots of lovely things. So do make use of those. And I think we're going to take some questions. So we've got somebody talking about zones of regulation to help teach emotional literacy and support self-regulation. Becky, do you use zones of regulation, or is that something that you tend to use?
I used to work in a children's home, and we would do that. Yes, we would have gaps between everything. A lot of the children I worked with were autistic, and they found that having that space to calm down and reset and change the mindset before we moved on really did help tremendously. And I think it can be very useful in school, particularly with younger children. Otherwise, things can get very frenzied, and that's when things go wrong. That's when good decisions aren't made and good choices aren't put into plan. So I think that can be a very good idea to have resetting points.
Yeah, I think things like, I found it really useful as a teacher. We can't all be mental health experts. We aren't there as teachers to diagnose. That's not our job. We are not educational psychologists or professionals, whatever. But I found it really, really useful to do some reading around adverse childhood experiences, and to look at the fight or flight and what actually happens to the body and the brain. And I'm happy to send links after or whatever to some great reading that I found. But just for me, having that understanding of actually what's going on in the brain. If I'm trying to talk to a child that's absolutely in flight mode and there's no point. There's no point in reasoning or talking, because their poor brains are so flooded with cortisol. They're so, their digestion shut down, everything is shut down. And so really, really important, I think, to understand some of the actual science of what's going on in the body behind that. And that gave me a better understanding of actually what's going on here, what's happening there when they're lashing out, or all of these phrases that we hear, or having a meltdown, and all these kind of things, actually what's going on. I find that really useful.
I read a really interesting article the other day that said the brain is so attuned to our breathing that if it detects even a hint of sort of shallow or rapid breathing, it thinks panic, 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 there's something wrong. And just by purposely slowing that down, just slowing it down by blowing out candles on your fingers or whatever, just slowing that breath, the brain goes, oh, okay,